Welcome, welcome. I'm John. I'm coming from you from Pod Shop in Old London. And I wanted to talk to you just a little bit about why it is that I travel to London a couple times a year, why I love it here and in New York, and why is it that these have developed into becoming the primary capitals of wine in the world. So, first of all, I've always kind of enjoyed getting to the big city. I love living in them, but they're really difficult to live in, but they're wonderful to visit for a few weeks. One of the things, because obviously, I am the CEO of Preface Wine down in Delray Beach, Florida. One of the advantages that we have down in Florida is that we have a lot of people moving in and kind of a growing population. That's really not quite as much true in New York and in London, as people in London continually move to Dubai and other locations, people in the United States know in New York you're moving down to Florida. People in California are moving to Texas. And part of this has to do with lifestyle. Part of that has to do with policy reasons. They just, for whatever reason, decide they need a change. And so we have a lot of people coming to us in Delray who live in these big cities. But the interesting thing about the big cities is there is a greater amount of concentration in the world of wine and, of course, food. So many of your great restaurants are still located in these big cities, London being a capital city, New York being, our commercial capital in the United States still. Even though we see more and more top restaurants coming, for example, to Miami. It does allow me to put on my warmer clothes. So that's kind of a fun little fun fact about my trips to London. But it also gives me access to a lot of the professionals that end up making a lot of the decisions that affect us. So great wine writers like Janice Robinson are here in London. And also you have the ability to interface with, the giant wine merchants, for example, here in London at Berry Brothers. And so, you have this very long history, and it really has to do with the movement of wine around the world. It probably won't surprise you to learn that more than 96% of all wine is sold kind of locally in the countries where it came from. So it's certainly more common to have French wine in France or Italian wine in Italy. But if you think about it, almost all Slovakian wine is consumed in Slovakia, or Brazilian wine is consumed in Brazil. And so it is true that most wine doesn't travel, but if it does travel, it ends up in these big cities. It ends up on the restaurant's wine list, and you have a number of very good drinkers who are tasting these wines and buying them and then presenting them to the public. One thing that I've always found to be terribly interesting is as the years go by, the more I drink, the better I am at it. Now, that wasn't necessarily true of all my friends in college. Some of them got very bad at drinking over time. But for me, what I've learned is that a lot of those reps of finding those different subtleties of those different things improve my taste, improve my interest. And obviously, as a wine shop owner, I get a chance to share that with our customers. But what's neat here is because so many people have to go through London in order to sell their wine throughout the continent, which is interesting because you'd think it would come through Paris, right? You would think that it would come through Bordeaux. You would think it would come through there. But really, the hub ends up being London, is that you are tasting and you are meeting directly with producers who travel from all over the world to come to London to meet with the people here. And if you're here at the right time, you get to meet with them too. And a lot of the methods are really, really interesting. So, one observation I have is that this huge increase in biodynamic and organic wine seems to have become almost normalized. In other words, it isn't such a huge advantage as it was before. It's now kind of more expected or par for the course. The other thing that I've kind of found interesting is the elevation of Italian wines. So, over the last couple years, I kind of noticed it, but I really noticed it now. You see the Italian collectible wines really coming to the forefront. Now, part of that might just have to do with kind of an unfamiliarity with them. And so maybe people in the wine trade were less familiar with Italian wines, where Italian makers have done a better job of getting out the word. But me, as someone who loves French wine, I just love French wine. it might be the case that France is not doing as good of a job as it used to, especially in advertising its exclusivity. We've also seen a big change in consumption habits. And so now it's almost the case that the United States in the fine wine market is making a much bigger difference than it did before. We also see Hong Kong coming back a little. Basically, after the pandemic, Hong Kong almost all but disappeared as a hub for wine. We're seeing some of the auctions produce good values, and we're seeing more and more action out of there in Asia, as well as a little bit of emergence in Singapore. Although their borders have begun to tighten, there still is a number of top producers that go there. And so here I am. I get to put on my warm clothes. I get to taste some things. And hopefully, for those of you who get a chance to visit Preface, it gives you a chance to try some of the things that I discovered on my trips. But also in kind of, more importantly, I hope that it'll help me produce some of the content about the things that are happening in the wine world. So those of you who like to just sit at home and have a glass, maybe not in one of those major cities, kind of see what the big city folk are up to.